news. We're back. So,
so Anthony, you and I had a conversation about a month ago, and we covered a lot of stuff, and you said something to me that I've repeated probably 5 or 6 times in the last month, and I had asked you about producing and engineering versus mastering. And I don't know if you remember what you said to me, but if hopefully say again.
I remember. I could probably quote it verbatim because I tell everybody this. Anybody who produces and mixes a record and tells you that they're going to master it as well doesn't know what they're doing, because you need the fresh set of ears to come in at third stage and sort of objectively listen to it and dial it in. And I always use the same guy to master. His name's Roger Leon. He's fantastic. He's from Master Disc. He came up with Howie Weinberg and Bob Ludwig and all that in Master Disc. And I have such a great relationship with him now that I'll actually send him my mixes as I'm mixing, and he could literally tell me what my mixes are lacking. Oh, raise the bass guitar a half a dB at 120 hertz, or like he gets more surgical with it. But anybody who doesn't realize that they're just trying to soak you for that third step, and they're just trying to make the money for the step. And you really need an objective opinion from a guy that has been sitting in the same room for 15, 20 years on the same speakers, mastering things. He knows exactly how it has to sound good on earbuds, to sound good on car stereos, to sound good on major, huge stereos. Like you need that third objective opinion on the third step.
That's a good point, Anthony, because you've been doing this now for, how long have you been producing for?
Oh, I don't know. Who knows? Since 89.
So what you would have seen a huge transition between the different devices that people hear the music on. So has that changed your producing edge, or have you been asked to master? I don't know if you've ever doing mastering yourself, but that's a very good point that I actually had never thought of before. The difference between the earbuds and the difference between our 6-way stereo system we had when we were kids is a big difference, right?
Well, you basically want it to sound great everywhere. You just want it. It doesn't change. You want it to sound great. I've had my own speakers in my studio since I opened up Schoolhouse in the mid '90s. I haven't changed my speaker setup, and so I know pretty much how it's going to sound. I hate earbuds because earbuds, as they work their way out of your ear, that you lose low end. I prefer headphones because they're more consistent. They stay in one place.
Yep.
I don't like Beats headphones are really good, but not very good for rock. They kind of are EQ'd already for hip hop.
Yep.
Curve is kind of like subby. But you get a good pair of headphones or whatever. And a car is the car is the hardest thing, and the car is basically the reason why surround sound never worked, is because 99% of the time when you're in your car, you're by yourself, and you're not in the middle.
Right.
You're on or the right if you're in England. So you're not going to be stereo center anyway.
But you would have gone through the whole gambit. You would have went from vinyl to cassette to CD to MP3 to, you would have done the whole gambit. So
the deterioration of the listening medium, but when I mix, I mix the way that I want to hear it. Hopefully the artist likes it, and then I'll send it to my mastering guy, and I'll send it to the artist, and then they come back with comments, and we'll do like minor tweaks. I usually never nail it on the first mix. It usually takes 2 or 3 mixes for me to make everybody completely happy,
So a question I didn't ask you that I'd be interested to hear, because if you've been doing it since, 88, 89, I mean, obviously technology today is absolutely crazy with some of the stuff you can do and whatnot, but are you a total believer? Do you miss the old sort of analog days? Or do you miss that thing, or are you totally 100% all in, or do you mix it up when you're doing different projects?
I still own my 2-inch Studer A80 24 track, and I bought it from Electric Lady, and I still have it in the studio. And most clients don't really want to bite the bullet for the cost of the tape, and that's pretty much the only reason why we don't turn it on. Yeah. I do like, okay, here's the pros and the cons. The pros of digital is that you do have fine editing, where I find editing like vocals and stuff and guitar solos and stuff is really great, because you could see it and move it and all that good stuff. You're not getting into moving it with samplers and delays like you have to do on tape. But the sound of tape is phenomenal. It blows digital away. It's not even close. And I also like the fact of the finite limit of tracks with tape. You have to make decisions. A lot of newer kids coming up that never got to work on tape, they'll just keep everything. And having like 100 tracks of guitars, and to me, if it doesn't sound good now, it's not going to sound good 5 days from now.
And
so
how the name of Jesus is going to sound live? Yeah, how do you ever replicate that live? That's the thing.
Saying you'll have 120 takes, and then you go back and you make a comp of the best or whatever. And to me, it's like, I like the finite space of real estate of how many tracks you have to work with. So you have to commit to your choices while you're tracking. And I treat Pro Tools like I treat a tape machine. I use minimal amounts of plugins, because I have tons of outboard gear, like old compressors and mic preheat, good stuff. So I don't need to live and die by plugins. And maybe I'll EQ a little bit with the plugins in Pro Tools, but pretty much everything else is in my mix. And I'm not a slave to that. So I was the last one kicking and screaming going into Pro Tools. Like I did not want to go there. And I held and held and held. And then finally I had to, because owning a studio, you have to be able to accommodate clients, and they ask for it.
Sure. I want to ask you, I'm a drummer, but anytime I've ever been in a studio, I find that usually the thing that holds you up the most is the vocals. And it might not necessarily be because it's a bad vocalist, but, you know, a song that might not be totally written, or the singer's not having a good day in the studio, or there's phrasing that goes on. How do you work with singers? And I'm not going to reference the story you told me when we were talking, but I'd like to know you know what I'm talking about. But I'd like to know your process about that.
I mean, it's just, it's like, it's like a relationship with different, you know, when you have different kind of girlfriends growing up and you're figuring out how to date girls or whatever. Certain girls respond to different types of approaches. It's the same thing with singers. Some singers you have to be tougher on to get the best out of them. Some singers you kind of have to coddle, and some singers you have to compliment them a lot to stroke their ego so that you can get the performance. Also, the type of music and the type of vocal that you're trying to pull out of them is also a factor in how you would approach them. If it's a heavier song, you might want to piss them off a little bit, you know? But vocals are different than guitars, bass, or drums, or keyboards, or anything else, because their instrument is internal. So if you play a guitar through an amp, you know, it's going to sound 99%, maybe 90% of the time the same day to day, you know? because it's just the same amp set up the same way with the same mic and the same guitar and blah blah blah. This is their body is their instrument. So if they don't sleep well, or they drank, you know, the beer's bad for your vocal cords, weed is bad for your vocal cords, but sometimes it works, you know, like it depends. So they're their own instrument, plus then their mentality alters their instrument. So it's kind of like it's a weird chemistry thing where there's a lot more variables to it than getting a good drum sound and just hit them hard till you pass out and we'll come back tomorrow, you know?
Right. Well, so I'm presuming that you have 1,000 stories. I don't know what you're allowed to tell, what you're not allowed to tell. Maybe you can just tell us maybe your most positive experience in the studio. How's that? And then maybe if you want to say the most negative, you can do that too. How's that?
Well, my most positive, probably, well, it's also my most recent with Jake. I mean, I never worked with somebody until I worked with Jake. I never worked with somebody that was so musical. That yeah, I worked with great guitar players or great drummers or great singers. Or Jake is a musician, and he's a classically trained pianist. So he thinks left hand, right hand, counter melody, counter rhythm. He doesn't just think of the guitar part. He thinks about all the other instruments and how they are interweaving and rubbing and blending to make chords happen and stuff. And I learned a lot, believe it or not, after doing this 30 some odd years professionally. Making patina with Jake, I learned a lot, which was a great experience because we did it on the ranch, and we took our time, and it was over a year to record, and he stayed at the ranch, and it was just basically him, me, and my son for the lion's share of the time, and then Phil would be there. We did a little bit of pre-production and writing, and then Phil, once the drums were done, he was gone. And then Darren would come in and out to sing. But predominantly, it was just Tyler, my son, Jake, and myself. And so we really got into discussing things. And we had the time because we owned the studio as well. It was a beautiful thing, you know. We weren't on the clock.
Yeah.
That I got to experience and see his brain in action, which was definitely a growing, great experience for me, you know.
I think we're going to take one more break. I want to go back to that because, Anthony, you and I had a conversation when we did. You were telling me about the process of recording patina and all the different sorts of things that you did there. I'd like to come back on the other side and maybe hit some of that because you had some really cool stories that you were talking about with different sounds and guitars and different things that you did.
Whatever you want.
Cool.
All right. So we'll be right back after these messages.